Welcome to the Big Success Podcast, cutting-edge conversations on business and personal success, as well as how to level up. Here's your host, #1 business coach in the world, Brad Sugars.
Our guest today is Nathalie Nahai. Human behavior expert is probably the simplest way I can describe this. When it comes to web design, the arts, unique vantage point to examine the complex way or the complex challenges that you and I face today of understanding people. 2 of her books, The Web of Influence, phenomenal read, really simple read, but it goes into the psychology of online persuasion, which I think in today's world is really, really important. It's kind of the manual or the go-to book for business leaders today and a lot of universities alike. Business Unusual. Again, a very different style of read, uncertainty and the psychology of brand resilience, how a brand today builds trust out there in the marketplace. It's one of the defining books of understanding how to do that of our time today. She runs her own podcast, the Hive Podcast, behavioral science advisor. We've had her speak at our Business Excellence Forum. She's done our Big Friday finish. She got clients like Google and the Harvard Business Review. Ethical business behavior is what she teaches. You're going to welcome and you're going to love learning from Nathalie Nahai. It's the Big Success Podcast. I'm Brad Sugars, the #1 business coach and your host today. Nathalie Nahai is with us. And Nathalie, first question. Real simple one, but not really. What is success to you?
Thanks for having me on the show. It's nice to be in conversation with you. I think success for me is about the freedom to flourish, which sounds quite nebulous, but it connects with our ability to be integrated. So to have different aspects of ourselves expressed and met. And obviously that relies upon having financial freedom as well, and the possibility for safety and security, and all of Maslow's being and deficit needs being met. But I think it's also about understanding how to create the kind of balance in your life where through the course of a week or a month, let's say, you feel as though all of your different aspects are getting the chance to thrive. So that's kind of the way I conceive of it. And in that sense, it's a bit like having an orchestra with your different parts all playing the piece. And you have to figure out how to create the symphony of your life so that everyone can partake in the way that feels good. And it's a balancing act, and the music changes through time. But I think that's how I conceive of success.
Yeah. How has your definition of success changed over your lifetime?
So in my 20s, having spent some time in the music industry and found it to be brutal, I kind of switched and decided to get into speaking. And in the tech world, being sort of a young woman with a mostly male kind of entourage, success for me was really just about making a mark with something that was valuable and not going in for all the kind of like razzmatazz and this kind of marketing spiel where people give it a lot of this and don't actually put their money where their mouth is. And so for me, it was really this kind of strong ambition to, in some senses, prove myself, in other senses, prove to other women, like, you can be on stage. It's not that hard. Come on, let's go. Also kind of challenge gender assumptions and make money. And I think as I've gotten older and I've realized that, I can do those things, now the other parts of myself that haven't had as much of a look in are coming front and center, which is extremely exciting and a bit nerve-wracking, but like, good.
I love that. As a father of 4 daughters, it's like, yes, here's another one for you to listen to, kids. So it's my 2 daughters that are in college. It's like every time they want to learn, it's like, here you go. Here's another one for you to study. Go for your life. So where do you think success chose you, or where do you think you chose success? At what age, or was there a story behind it, or tell me your thoughts?
I don't know. I mean, I think success is one of these things. Like when I look at people who have a very clear vocation and a very clear path, who've built something which is tangible, like you have, or you could think about someone like, the founder of Patagonia, or a musician like Patti Smith, someone who's really blazed their own trail. And some of these people kind of have this sense of, this is my vocation, I'm going for it, I've got very specific KPIs, I've got a very strong sense of what it looks like. And for me, it's kind of difficult. I'm always grappling with the sense of, how do I qualify success? It's not just the financial thing, But if I didn't have the financial support of the work that I do, I wouldn't have the freedom to do that stuff. So I don't know about it. Like some people I think would look at me and go, oh my God, she's successful. But then what is success? Is it having a massive penthouse? Is it having the freedom to paint when I want to, or to dance or to sing? And so I think I don't know. I think it's a lot to do with choosing what to do with the hand that you're dealt. And I've always had this sense of, oh my God, I've got so many things possible available to me at this point in life. If I look back through previous generations and different countries in the world, I have to use it. So it's more the sense of this need, this drive to kind of make the most out of it. Time is short. By the roll of the dice, I've been born at a time and place where I can do these things. And I think that's kind of, it's more that sense of needing to make the most of it. So it's almost like a deficit thing as opposed to, oh my God, yeah, I'm going to be really successful. I don't really think of it like that.
Success means so many things to so many people. And that's why I love this podcast, because we get to get such differing points of view. But when you think about how success happens, what's your theory on how it happens, or your formula for success, I guess?
Grit, determination, perseverance, negotiating with oneself. I think a lot of it is about making a decision to do something where other people kind of fall away. Like people will say, oh yeah, I'd like to write a book. I can't tell you the number of people that say to me, I want to write a book. I'm like, okay, great. I will send you the proposal format. I'll tell you my motivational strategies. Go do it. And do you know how many people do it? Actually, among my circle of friends, quite a few people do. I think because you attract similar people.
Yeah.
But it's hard. And I think one of the factors in success, whether you consider it to be like juggling lots of things or spending a year on a book or 3.5 years in an art academy or whatever it is, or building a business, it's perseverance and determination. And also the flip side of that, dealing with the shadow of burnout. Like, how do you set yourself up in such a way that you can actually treat it as a marathon and find joy and pleasure, so that when you hit those really rocky bits where you're like, why the hell am I doing this? I'm miserable. This is hard. Why shouldn't I? I should have just been hired by someone and something. So when you get those kind of dark moments, you kind of go, no, but I'm doing this for a reason.
So let's go back to that negotiating with yourself comment, because I love that idea. Tell me more about what you're thinking.
So I'm not very good at negotiating with myself, mostly because I've got this really strong kind of, if we're talking in terms of archetypes, which I find helpful in terms of visualizing how I relate to different aspects, this kind of warrior archetype, the one that gets shit done and is very driven and determined. And I have that very strongly. And so for the book, for instance, I got to the point where I was like, oh my God, I have to get this over the line. It's miserable. I'm writing by myself. My back hurts from sitting for too long. I haven't seen another human in like 3 weeks. What am I doing? And then a smart negotiation would be, okay, you're right. You're miserable right now. Go to a dance class for 3 hours, take 3 days off, refuel, and then we'll come back to it. So it's this kind of, how do you keep your inner constellation of selves happy? And making sure that you're not just cracking that whip, because if you crack that whip, you're going to suck the joy out and then you're stuck. And that's when you end up with people, and I know quite a few now hitting their 40s who are just turning around and going, oh my God, I have everything on paper. I am so miserable.
Yeah.
And so the trick is to negotiate to not end up in that place, right?
I've climbed the ladder, but it's against the wrong building.
Yes. And then how do you leap across to a different one? It's like, the view from this one's pretty good, but I don't really feel that moved by it anymore. How can I go somewhere where there's more awe and splendor? Yeah, and
I think that's one of the reasons that we discuss success, because success is historically, people think about success, and I see a lot of people fall in the trap, and I'm sure you do, of defining success by how others might define it for them rather than themselves. How did you get to defining success for yourself rather than other people's definition of success?
Honestly, I think I've only started really getting into it this year. Literally a couple of weeks ago, I've been kind of laboring under this assumption that success equals being really good at one thing, building one thing, being determined in one direction. And, I look at people who have businesses who are similar sort of ages to me, and I think, okay, you've kind of made it. And again, this is obviously an outside perspective and it's much harder on the inside. And then I kind of sat there with myself and I ended up having this weird moment of reflection where I was like, hang on, where did I get this idea that you have to be one thing? And when I look at the people that I really admire, they're people who do many things, but do them well in kind of an interwoven way. So Patti Smith is a great example here. Or if you go back to people who are artists, many of them were sculptors and artists and woodworkers and musicians. And it's quite a modern idea, this sense that you have to be good at one thing. And I also read a piece of research recently that was looking at predictors of success in athletes, so top performing athletes. And this particular piece of research is saying that most of the people who go on to be world-class athletes actually start out with a very broad base of sporting interests. They don't specialize till later. Yeah. The voice is really interesting. And so then it kind of struck me that while everyone else is kind of going, yeah, you've got to do your one thing, it's this linear, focused, hyper-Western version of what success is. I kind of thought, well, hang on, no, what is it actually to integrate everything where everything's connected and not fighting with everything? So if I'm writing a book and it gives me the freedom to do other things, maybe there's a connection there and then I don't have to feel split. And if I don't feel split, I'm more intrinsically motivated. And if I'm more motivated, I can go the marathon. If I can go the marathon, I can build the life that's thriving. So it's kind of, it's a work in progress for sure. I'm curious about how you define success, because you have built a big business and you do have a clear orientation from the outside looking in.
Well, someone asked me last night, am I offering the greatest and most valuable use of myself to the world? And my answer was very simply, yes, I'm raising great kids. You know, I think one of the challenges, Nathalie, that you've just presented to us is that one singular definition of success can be a killer for a lot of people. That whole one thing. It was Curly on the Three Amigos where he said, there's the one thing. And it's like, no, maybe not, Curly, maybe not. You're on the Big Success Podcast. I'm Brad Sugars. Nathalie Nahai is with us. We're going to be back on the Psychology of Persuasion.
In 30 minutes a day for 30 days, 30X Business will take you through the exact hard-won business principles that Brad Sugars has personally developed over the past 30 years as an entrepreneur, investor, and business advisor. Join Brad and his team and 100 other entrepreneurs who want to start building a successful business today.
And we're on Big Success. Nathalie, how do we succeed at influence? Because your book's amazing, Psychology of Online Persuasion. How do you succeed at persuasion?
The first thing I would say is that it has to be reciprocal. So if you're wanting to persuade something of someone, if you have to persuade someone of something, if you're wanting to get a real connection going, which you need, that sense of rapport builds trust, which increases receptivity, then you need to make sure that you are both in it with aligned goals. So the first thing to do is to make sure you're attentive to what that person's goals are and whether it aligns with yours. If it doesn't, in an e-commerce perspective at least, then you have no business trying to persuade them. Go persuade someone who is up for it, because you'll end up with a much better long-term outcome with an advocate, someone who's loyal, which is essentially what creates long-term sustainable business. So there's the first point is about orienting yourself so that you are meeting people whose goals align with your own. Then there's all sorts of ways that you can make things more fun. So if you're listening to someone or speaking with them, be attentive to what they say, how they say things, mirror it. I'm not talking about like parroting stuff back, but make sure you paraphrase and you understand. You have to understand as well where someone's coming from, their context. What are the values that motivate their choices? What are some of the things that are meaningful to them? What are their priorities? If you're talking about business, it may be that you're in a negotiation and the sticking point appears to be price. But if you dig deeper, maybe they want something else. Maybe it's positioning. Maybe it's prestige, whatever. So it starts with being attentive to the other person and then seeing where you can join forces to create something together. And if you take it from that perspective, that's more in sort of line with influence for good, ethical persuasion.
I like it. So the 5 principles, the 4 C's framework, take us through that, because I think it's pretty amazing what you've created.
Thank you. So the 4 C's framework. So when I was researching the book for Business Unusual and looking at the companies that had thrived throughout the very tumultuous time of the pandemic, there were certain qualities that I found repeated time and again in the ones that were doing well. And so I created a 4 C's framework to make it easier to understand. So these 4 C's start with the first, which is an explicit commitment to certain moral principles or values. So what do you stand for as a person, as a business, as an organization? Mm-hmm. The second is about having congruence. So being clear and congruent in word and deed. Your actions match what you say. And so to make sure that you're actually able to demonstrate that you're walking the talk. The third C is about consistency. So building a track record of action and words over time to make sure that when a third party looks at you or you mess up, you've built a track record so people can say, okay, well, Brad's company is one that has actually walked the talk. We're giving them the benefit of the doubt. Yeah. And the fourth one is about coherence between intention and behavior, which sounds a bit tricky. It's basically doing the right thing for the right reason. So it's this sense of internal coherence, even when, or especially when, you're doing it at some cost yourself. So Patagonia is a great example here because way back in the day when they started, they put purpose and people and planet on equal footing to profit. And I know that you've probably seen the headlines in recent months that they recently put the Earth as their only shareholder. So you can see that this company has a track record of doing the right thing for the right reason before it became sexy and cool, before the bandwagon kind of rolled into gear. So those things, committing to certain values, being congruent in word and deed, consistent over time, and coherent, doing the right things for the right reason, that is a really great place to start. And if you apply it to yourself, because we're all hypocrites in some ways, because, humans are messy, but if you apply it to yourself, you go, okay, which are the areas that maybe I don't live into my potential, and which are the ones that I find easier, and where can we adjust to make sure that we're living with greater integrity? And it feels better to do that. So yeah, it's another way to kind of live in greater harmony with oneself and with others.
Yeah. The pandemic is obviously a crazy time for a lot of businesses, and a lot of businesses came out of it worse off. A lot came out about the same. But there's some businesses that did amazing for it. A lot of what you're talking about there, though, is not business strategy. It's human strategy.
Yeah, but businesses are made of humans and we forget this. So whether you're looking at trends from the perspective of, attracting and retaining great people who work for you or work with you, or you're thinking about customers, at the end of the day, these are just different roles that we inhabit. We're still individuals. And coming back to this theme of flourishing and integration, if you want to succeed as a business or as an organization or within your relationships of any form, it's important to be able to show up in a way that other people can count on and not kind of be flippant or kind of change course halfway through. So it's the same in terms of whether one's speaking about organizations or friends. You want someone that you can rely on to do what they say they're going to do and when they're going to do it.
When obviously, behavioral science is something that you've been teaching for a long time. Let's look at how we succeed then at the values side of that. How do we communicate our values to the market as a business? How do we live that, or how do we succeed at that, I guess?
So the first thing, obviously, is identifying what the values are that you hold dear. And it can be quite tricky. Like every time people ask me that, I've got no idea. So sometimes it's easier to start by talking about the stories that you care about or people that you look up to. What is it that they do? How do they live? What are the choices they make? What motivates their decisions? And then taking it through that external lens, it can be easy to figure out what it is that you care about. But that was one of the reasons why for the book, in collaboration with Dr. Kiki Leutner, she's an amazing woman, we created the Values Map, which is a free tool which uses Shalom Schwartz's theory of basic human values, which is a fascinating framework. It's kind of like a golden standard in the world of psychology. And you can apply it to organizations. So if you want to try it out, it's free because I want people to do better with their values. So go and use it and test it out. Thevaluesmap.com, you type in answers to a 40-item questionnaire and it will tell you, first of all, like a kind of fun archetype, but then it really drills into, all right, this is what you say you care about. These are other companies and brands that share similar values to you. This is how you apply it to your branding, communications, organizational structures, etc. So that's a useful place to start because it can be quite overwhelming when you start digging into the literature. Yeah.
And I guess one of the things that you teach about is the integrity of that, of it not just being something you put out there for marketing's sake. Let's put it that way. Explain more about that for me.
So then there's the kind of like, it's this woke washing, virtue signaling, we're going to jump on the most recent bandwagon without actually making sure our house is in order. So for instance, when Me Too campaigns happen, when it's a campaign about Black Lives Matter, when it's a campaign about Indigenous rights, when it's a campaign about, I don't know, the menopause. It could be anything. You take anything that's important to people, and then you look at the people making those decisions at board level. That's going to give you an indication. Okay, so you talk about women in leadership positions. How many women in a variety of roles are there at the senior echelon of your company? And this is one of the things that came out when, I'm not going to name names, but there were quite a lot of companies when George Floyd was murdered that came out in solidarity. And a lot of people responded really angrily and said, well, how can you dare speak about this when you've got an entirely white, mostly male board and no pipeline to support people coming in to train them up in positions that they'd be amazing at, but you just haven't bothered to kind of reach out. So there's also that question, and it goes back to the C's. It's like, have you shown that you've made that commitment in tangible, actionable ways?
Yeah. I think it's really interesting to watch as we go through success, just how being who you are is more important. And that's corporately, it's human-wise. Don't try and be something you're not. It's the bandwagon. Great. I'm not getting on that bandwagon. I've never spoken to it. I've never dealt with it. It's not my thing. So let me stay true to who I am. So add that to your theories on customer trust. How do we succeed at building trust with customers?
So I think one of the key things is giving people back their agency. It's weird because we talk about, especially in the tech world, people talk about customers as users when they're using tech. Which, they are using the piece of technology, but it's a whole person at the other end of the device. And so if you're going to create a situation of trust, you have to give them the agency to be able to interact with you with some control, right? So a good example here of experiences where people get stripped out of their control is when you get hyper-personalized ads from brands that you've not interacted with before based on your history. And you're just like, well, why are you targeting me? So that's a really bad way of creating trust, because people are going to say, you've got information I haven't given you. I don't know who you are. Back off. The flip side to that is to personalize in a way that you give people the choice as to what they opt in and out of. So for instance, Bloom & Wild, which is an amazing company, florist in the UK, digital first, they let people opt in and out of Mother's Day messaging or Father's Day messaging, or whatever it is. And so as a company, you can build trust and also get personalized information and data that's rich simply by giving people control. And so we forget that actually, if you give people a bit of respect, you give them greater agency, they'll be much more likely to want to do business with you and then to have that possibility to form a deeper attachment. So that's one of the biggest things with trust is agency.
You're on the Big Success Podcast. I'm Brad Sugars, your host. We'll be back in a moment to talk about scaling up.
A behavioral science expert, Nathalie Nahai's background in human behavior, web design, and the arts offer a unique vantage point from which to examine the complex challenges we face today. For more information on Nathalie, please go to her website today.
We're back with Nathalie Nahai and behavioral science. Nathalie, some of your clients, you work with phenomenal names, the Harvard Reviews, Accentures, Googles. You take them from good to great when it comes to their brand, when it comes to building trust, their ethical behavior, their principles. How do you teach people to go from good to great?
I think a lot of it comes down to giving people, this is why I hope, giving people a sense of possibility. Because I think when you're in a business and you kind of get locked into a role, it can be very easy to kind of forget the bigger picture or see how things connect in your role and outside in the bigger world. So one of the things that I hope to do, that I endeavor to do in my talks, because obviously it's about psychology and human behavior, is to make sure that when I'm giving the talk, people have something that they can apply to their own lives that explains some of their behaviors. So I'm constantly trying to find points of connection between them and the people that they're impacting, and between the principles and ways that they can understand themselves better to unlock something in them. So there's this kind of sense of, how can I create something in the space of 30 minutes or 40 minutes? Because mostly what I do is keynotes as well as advisory. How can I unlock something for someone so they come away thinking, oh my God, I didn't know that. That makes total sense. I'm going to apply it, or I'm going to try it myself or with my kids, or I'm going to do it with a customer and see what happens. Yep. So it's about that kind of unlocking and connecting.
So imagine you and I are friends, which we are, but we're sitting down chatting. And I said to you, Nathalie, psychologically, teach me how to go from good to great. What's the psychology of going from, the small dreams to big dreams, I guess?
I think one of the things, there's a couple of things. There's like the psychological thing and then practical thing. So the psychological thing, Carol Dweck is a very interesting researcher psychologist who has been famous for talking about the growth mindset, the idea that if you teach young children, but there are different studies now that kind of take this beyond school. If you teach young children that intelligence is something that one can work at, that's malleable, that can grow, then when they come across challenging questions, tasks, etc., when they get a wrong answer, rather than feeling like a failure, they go, oh, hang on, there's an opportunity to grow here. So there's this sense of taking the fear out of not knowing or getting things wrong and getting them to think, well, actually, I'm contributing towards growth. I'm contributing towards intelligence and full functioning and flourishing. So that's one thing from a psychological perspective. Stripping the fear out. Within teams, it means getting greater psychological safety. So you can speak up and not feel like you're going to get shamed or admonished for looking, ignorant or whatever it might be. So that's really important. And then in terms of the other side of things, which I've learned through coaching and through scheduling, is to make sure that if you have a big dream, break it down into smaller steps. Like I'm painting in the studio almost every day, and I want to get my art in front of a specific group of people. And so I'm applying to competitions. I've got a spreadsheet. I've got all of the ones that I'm interested in, the names of artists that I aspire to have my work in the galleries with. So it's kind of, what are some of the actionable things that you can do in order to start stepping in that direction? And I think the other thing, which I learned really weirdly when I was writing the first book in my 20s, was if you tell people, and this is probably like a marketing 101 thing, but I never learned marketing directly from an MA or anything. If you tell people what you're doing, you're like, I'm writing a book. It's going to be a business bestseller. It's on this subject. It's really exciting. Put me in touch with people that could be interested in this. Obviously, I didn't say bestseller at the time because I was a bit too shy then. But if you're telling people what your dream is and asking for help, people will help. Yeah, they actually do. And it's extraordinary what doors can open up if you're genuine and you are kind to people and you ask, look, I need this. Can you put me in touch with someone? So that's something else that I think has been really powerful and actually is quite undervalued.
So let's dive into a quick fire round then. What are your thoughts on how do you succeed at enjoying life, having fun?
Be present. Pay attention to, so I'm a big foodie, pay attention to the food. Don't have other stuff going on. If you're spending time with friends, book in a solid 4 hours, turn your phone on silent and stick it in a different room so that you can actually just really enjoy being with others. Get in your body, go dancing, go walk, for a forest walk or something like this. Things that get you back in your body in the present moment are amazing.
Love it. How do you succeed at setting goals?
Scheduling more than to-do lists. Schedule time, like an hour to do X and achieve Y. And then that way, if you haven't achieved all of your Ys, at least you've spent the time on that thing.
How do you succeed at personal growth or self-development?
Listen. Listen to other people. Ask hard questions. If you're struggling in an area of your life and you've tried everything, get a coach, get a therapist. Get some people to help, because there's lots of things that people can help you with that you might not have tried.
How about succeeding at health? How do you succeed at health?
Oh, God. Well, I do the 5-2 because I'm a big foodie. And if I don't, then I just eat too much sugar and drink too much wine. So the 5-2 is a great place to start for me, at least.
Now explain to people the 5-2. Some people might not know what that means.
Oh, so the 5-2 is when you take, so there's 7 days in the week, you take 2 days out of the week. So it could be a Wednesday and a Friday, or a Monday and a Wednesday, whatever, where for women, you eat 500 calories, for men, you eat 600. And so on those days, you're basically really reducing what you're putting in. So on those days, I won't have any carbs or sugar or alcohol, obviously. And then it means that for the rest of the week, I eat healthily, but I do like to munch. So it means then I can do that without worrying too much. So health, yeah. Also enjoy, people are so bloody strict with what they eat. They're doing this diet and that diet, and don't drink booze because you'll, diet. Pleasure is so important. We're embodied for a reason. So if you have the good fortune to be able to eat beautiful food, take pleasure.
Very
sure.
nice. Now,
and then obviously exercise.
I'm a little scared of asking this one. Asking the super psychologist, how do you succeed at relationships?
I think it depends on. So I'd say one of the things that's really interesting to look at is to explore your attachment style. Mm-hmm. So some people who are lucky are raised in families where they have secure attachment. The parents are there, they're available, they're not anxious or avoidant, so the child grows up secure. Mm. If you are not one of those people, and there are many of us who are not those people, it helps to figure out if you tend towards anxiety or towards avoidance, and then it means that when difficult things come up, you know which way you're going to retreat or react. And then if you know that about yourself, not only can you explain it to a partner, but you can also then take steps to come into communication with them in a way that feels safe enough so that you're always kind of stepping to that edge and that threshold of growth, but you're doing it in a self-compassionate way and you're doing it with respect to the other. So I think knowing yourself, being attentive to the other person and really listening when they speak. And one way to do that, actually, if you're interested in communication styles, nonviolent communication as a practice is amazing. So you can check that out as well.
Very nice. Best quote you've ever heard on the subject of success?
Okay, so this is the one that comes to my mind. And it's by a French writer who's extraordinary. Her name is Nathalie Nahai. And the quote is, and this always stays with me, it's the only one that I remember. And the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom.
Wow.
Yeah.
Poetry in a quote.
She's amazing. So.
Nathalie Nahai, Webs of Influence, Business Unusual, phenomenal. Thank you so much for giving us your time today. Really enjoyed having you on the Big Success Podcast.
You've been listening to the Big Success Podcast with the #1 business coach in the world, Brad Sugars. To learn more about how to achieve business and personal success, as well as how to level up or listen to past episodes, visit www.bradsugars.com.